welcome everybody to a very exciting and lively discussion today on a topic that I'm sure is on everybody's mind. Just to introduce everybody, I'm Elliot Bassett with Ellerbrock-Norris. We have Andy Bassett, president of Ellerbrock-Norris, and the one and only Doug Fletcher, just fresh off a podcast episode. What's the Hazard podcast? Check it out if you haven't yet. But no, I'm excited for this conversation, guys, because it's an interesting one to be talking about, very topical with the current environment we're in, and that is just around potential changes to OSHA in the potential new administration, the Biden administration. And so we're just going to kind of talk through what those might look like and kind of see where we get to. So Andy, I'll kind of kick it over to you to talk through your thoughts there and kind of set the stage, and then we'll get it over to Doug, certainly with his expertise and experience in talking through it.
Yeah, for sure. So you summarized it well. The conversation is exactly that. Is we know historically when we see changes in presidential administrations, the governmental agencies that those administrations oversee oftentimes see changes as well. And so we've started to get some questions when we're talking, from a risk advisory standpoint around people asking, hey, what's kind of coming with OSHA if in fact, we see a change to the Biden administration. So I think it's a great, as Elliot said, timely topic. We couldn't have a better source of knowledge on it than you, Doug. So I think the first question becomes maybe just historically walk us through when we see changes in administration, presidential administrations, what are some of the things we usually see at the OSHA level? I know you've been engaged with OSHA in different capacities over time and seen multiple presidential administration changes. So maybe just walk us through some of the things you see change, maybe even if you see trends when we're going from a Democratic to a Republican or vice versa. Just high level, walk the audience through what maybe you expect to see when change happens.
Absolutely. First of all, good morning, guys. It's good to see you. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. This is a really interesting topic, and I know that we are going to be talking more about it in the next month or two. I mean, obviously, this is really on the forefront of everybody's mind, I think, from a safety standpoint. And you were absolutely right. It's interesting. I started working with OSHA during the Truman administration. No, not Truman. The Clinton administration, actually. I started with OSHA in 1996 under the Clinton administration. I served during the Bush administration, and then I served during the Obama administration. And so, Democratic to Republican to Democratic administrations, which was really interesting. And I have to be honest, I was amazed at how political workplace safety and health actually is. I was under the naive impression that something like workplace safety and health would just be, hey, it is what it is, and we just stay the line, and it's just going to be the same. And I was, to be quite frank, I was really amazed at how dramatically different the two different parties administer an OSHA program. And so I think that if you follow politics at all, certainly you understand that Democratic administrations tend to be a little bit more, they favor regulatory compliance a little bit more. Republican administrations tend to be less regulatory in nature, and so those preferences become very apparent as you watch these changes in administration. It's very pendulum-like. I mean, if we're watching the approach go back and forth, it's very much like a pendulum. Now, OSHA is funded through appropriations by Congress. So when Congress goes through the Appropriations Act every year to come up with a budget for the federal government, OSHA just puts in a budget request, and they get monies just like every other agency. And so with that appropriation comes basically a contract with Congress. And so OSHA agrees to make a certain number of inspections. They agree to focus on certain industries. They agree to avoid some industries. That's part of this negotiation with Congress. Here's the money. This is what we expect. And if you look at historically, the number of inspections does not change significantly over the last 20 years or so. The number kind of maintains a very steady state. It might fluctuate a little bit based on staffing levels, but for the most part, Congress says we want 40,000 inspections a year. Here's your money. My nephew Shecky happens to have a painting company, so we're not inspecting painters this year. But, beyond that, it's very predictable. But what changes with administrations, in my experience, is more the attitude toward enforcement. Okay, Republican administrations tend to be more, well, in fact, in the Bush administration, we referred to it as kinder and gentler. A kinder, gentler OSHA. We were a little bit more focused on outreach and education, voluntary compliance type programs, the things that I was actually involved in as a compliance assistance person. And the Democratic administrations tend to be more enforcement focused. The Democratic administrations tend to be more driven by labor organizations. They have a voice in the administration of OSHA under a Democratic administration, and they tend to be more interested in enforcement. Truthfully, there was very little difference between the Clinton administration and the Bush administration. Even attitudinally, it was relatively similar. Under the Bush administration, they did create the compliance assistant position that I held with OSHA for a number of years. That was a brand new position, and they wanted someone specific in the area offices to be doing this outreach and the voluntary compliance programs. The biggest difference that I noticed was under the Obama administration, when OSHA took on almost an adversarial role. They were very aggressive. They were almost, there was this underlying, the employer is the enemy kind of an attitude, and it manifests itself in the outcome of inspections more so than it does just the number of inspections. And so, I think we're all getting newsletters and blog information coming to us from different sources that believe that a President Biden would be very much like a President Obama in that respect. Much more enforcement oriented, much more aggressive in its approach to enforcement. One of the things that I can share an anecdote with you, okay? I was the compliance assistance specialist in Omaha at the change in administration between Bush and Obama. And so David Michaels was appointed the assistant secretary for OSHA. Dr. Michaels was an academic. He was an epidemiologist at some university back east, Georgetown or George Washington or something. And he hired a woman named Debbie Berkowitz, who was the president of, I think, the AFL-CIO, or one of the large, maybe the UFCW, one of the large labor organizations. She was like the safety and health director for this large labor organization. And she became the chief of staff to Dr. Michaels in the OSHA office. And she was making visits of different area offices. She came out to the Omaha area office, and we sat down in the conference room with Ms. Berkowitz, and she was telling us about their vision of OSHA and what we're going to be doing. And she started talking about things like, she goes, I know that we've been doing these outreach things like voluntary compliance stuff. I don't like it. I don't think we're going to be doing that. And I know that we do a lot of this OSHA 10 and 30-hour training. I'm not sure I like that. We're probably going to do away with that. And basically, it sounded like she was reading my job description as she was talking about programs that were going to be eliminated. I mean, I sat there praying that we weren't going to go around and do introductions, because I thought for sure once I announced I was a compliance assistant specialist, she'd fire me on the spot, So, I mean, it was terrifying that their intention was to eliminate everything that we had done under the previous administration, directed at voluntary compliance, at employers choosing to go forward and do these things in cooperation with OSHA. And to be quite frank, that's what I expect under a Biden administration. He will appoint someone to head up OSHA, at the assistant secretary for OSHA, and they will take a much more aggressive approach to enforcement again. I mean, I think that without question is what we can expect.
That's interesting, because I think that what's generating the questions we've gotten is a lot of people, I think, feel that. I think people that have been in business long enough have experienced what you just mentioned, and maybe that unfortunate adversarial position that shifted for a period of time with OSHA and employers. So a question, I guess, that generates from me when I hear this is, if in fact that would be how things would play out in a transition, what's the timing of that? I mean, is this something that happens quick, or maybe help business owners understand that? Yeah,
that's a really good question, man. They
Every
do have
once in a while, Doug, you've got a good one.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is an appointment that needs to be confirmed. Okay, the assistant secretary is an appointed position that has to be confirmed by Congress. Typically, that goes through without much challenge. Not always, but traditionally it has been, it goes through without challenge, and that takes a little while. So the people that will be running the agency in the meantime will be the career politicians, the career people. The deputy assistant secretary who's been a career OSHA person for a long time, and so they tend not to be quite as reactionary. They tend not to feel the swing of the pendulum quite as dramatically. They just toe the line for a while until an assistant secretary, and then the special appointments, the political appointees come on board, and then they start changing things. And so my guess would be that we have probably about 9 months to a year of cushion before that takes place. But in the meantime, I think they've been very clear that they will, in addition to attitude, the one thing that is dramatically different under a change in administration to a Democratic administration is an increase in the proposed rulemaking. And so if you look at the regulatory agenda under a Trump administration, I think there might be 2 or 3 things that they have attempted to change through the rulemaking process over the last 4 years. And if you look at the Obama administration, the regulatory agenda was probably 200 pages long, the things that they wanted to change. I mean, it was, they weren't all going to happen, but they certainly had an idea of implementing a number of new regulations. So I think that very early on in the process, if there is a change in administration, that we will see this reassembly of a rulemaking agenda. They definitely have been talking about an emergency temporary standard for COVID. Yeah. The agency has been bashed repeatedly for not having a standard in place for COVID or airborne infectious disease. And so I would assume that would be something that would change very early, even before the appointment of an assistant secretary. I think we could expect that. I think there are some other things that the Trump administration has changed that we would probably expect to be rolled back, to the way they were prior to the Trump administration, and just a much more rigorous rulemaking agenda, I think. But again, I don't think that takes place immediately. Mm-hmm. There is a period of time bringing the team on board and getting them out there and getting those things underway. So again, some of those things might take place early, and certainly the COVID stuff, I think, is on the forefront of the agenda for a new administration. Some of the other rulemaking changes and things like that would probably take somewhere between 9 months to a year to get in place. But I think that would be, there would be changes, certainly.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Well, I think it definitely is. And we're going to go deeper, as you mentioned, next month in this topic. But I think, certainly, Doug, there's a lot of potentially negative changes to an employer. But thinking about it from a positive perspective, we talk a lot in the ENCORE Safety Network to members about driving that culture of working safely. So I just think from your perspective and what you've seen in your past life, and then what you do with clients today, if your employer that just says, what, rather than worry about changes in enforcement related issues with OSHA, I'm just going to focus on driving a culture of working safely. How much does that impact or set you up as an employer to, hopefully not have to worry about too many of these changes?
Well, I mean, man, Elliot, you've touched on it. I mean, ideally, every company is working toward establishing a more safe work environment and driving their culture in that direction. So if you're doing those things, then it shouldn't matter, ideally, right? I mean,
ideally, yes.
if you have an effective safety and health program and you're doing the right things, then I don't think you should panic. I mean, I certainly don't, I don't think that's warranted, and we should continue what we're doing to, continue to push forward. The bottom line is that the team here in Omaha that we have in place right now is not going to change significantly. So even after January 22nd or whatever the date is, if something does change, if the administration changes, the team that's here doesn't change in large part. I know that they have talked about adding compliance staff to the area offices, but bringing on new people and getting them trained up and functional takes time as well. So they know who you are. Most of the OSHA office folks, they know the companies in their jurisdiction, and they work with them regularly, and they know what their attitudes are. So if you're a company that does the right thing and you're working your program, I don't think you need to panic about this. It probably does increase the likelihood of an inspection, perhaps. It might also increase the severity of an inspection, but ultimately, the companies that are doing the right thing have nothing to fear. But I will say that if you are a company that has avoided doing the right thing, whether intentionally or unintentionally, or have just maybe minimized the importance of doing the right thing, I think those companies are much more vulnerable. If you are not doing what you're supposed to be doing, if you're not driving your program in the right direction, those are the occasions where the outcome of an inspection can be really harsh. And so, yeah, I mean, ideally, we're doing the right things and there will be no change. But realistically, when the guys are told, get out there and make inspections, and this is what I expect, and we can talk more about that, during the discussion portion of this. But there are negative outcomes certainly possible from those interactions. So this is not intended to be panic. It's not panic time. It's just, maybe we need to revisit, how we intend to approach, maybe even talk about how we intend to approach dealing with OSHA if OSHA does show up next year. I mean, maybe that's something that we need to talk about, how the company is going to address an OSHA inspection. Should that change, or should we just continue on as we would have under the Trump administration? Maybe that's worth discussing. So I think there are a lot of things we can talk about.
Exactly right. So I think that's probably a good place to segue to kind of closing this one, because they're in the next session when we get together. There's so many things. We can talk more about the timing. We can talk probably some specifics on things that might be potentially on the agenda, if you will, for the new administration. And we can dive into, Elliot brings such a good point, is, look, if we're already doing the right things culturally, why press the panic button, right? And so I think there's a lot of ways we can take this. This is really interesting stuff, frankly, to me, because I know from our experience, it's on the minds of a lot of companies right now. And so I thought it was great, Doug. Thanks as always for the knowledge. It's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a great discussion. I look forward to it. I always look forward to, the members of the community have insights that I don't have. I really appreciate hearing from them and what their concerns are. So I look forward to that. And but it's something that I think, conscientiously we should be considering. Do we need to make any changes? Do we need to alter the way we're doing business? Do we, just business as usual? What is our position going to be? And if you've not considered that, I think you might want to do so.
Absolutely. And what you guys are referring to for everybody is on December 9th, Wednesday, December 9th at 10 a.m. We're going to do a live session on this topic. And so Q&A discussion, hopefully that is a very collaborative discussion around our expectations with the new administration, and as a business owner, what to be prepared for. So we're looking forward to that. I think it'll be a great discussion. So catch that. If you're watching this, we'll include information on how to attend that and look to get everybody there.
Awesome.
So
sounds good, guys.
All right. Thanks, guys. And everybody have a great weekend.
Absolutely.
Thanks. See you guys.